Tyler, Ethan, and Caleb. 3 names whispered in the darkest corners of the internet. PMCs, they called themselves. Private military contractors. Guns for hire. Skills honed in digital battlefields. Today their skills would be tested in a very real way. They were about to embark on Operation Red Steel. Their objective: infiltrate an abandoned Soviet factory. Extract any valuable intel or resources left behind from the Cold War. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. The factory was rumored to be crawling with scabs. Ruthless, AI-controlled mercenaries armed to the teeth. This was no walk in the park. This was Tarkov.
Remember, we stick to the plan. Get in, get the goods, get out, no heroics.
Tyler and Caleb, their faces grim, nodded in agreement. This was serious business. The factory was a decaying behemoth. Rusted iron bars twisted like skeletal fingers against the sky. Broken windows stared like empty eye sockets. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the ghosts of a bygone era. Ethan led the way, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. They moved like phantoms, their boots crunching on shattered glass and debris. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant caw of a crow.
Eyes peeled.
They knew the scabs could be anywhere, lurking in the shadows. They entered a vast production hall. Giant machines, silent and still, stood like monuments to a forgotten industry. Conveyor belts hung limply, covered in dust and cobwebs. The place felt heavy with history, with secrets, and with danger. They reached an office complex, a stark contrast to the industrial decay surrounding it.
We can use that to cover our retreat. Caleb, you take point. Tyler, watch our 6.
They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing on the metal stairs. The air grew colder as they ascended. They reached a landing, a single flickering fluorescent light casting long, eerie shadows. Old propaganda posters, faded and torn, clung to the peeling paint. A reminder of the factory's past, of the world it once knew.
This is too easy, too quiet.
Don't let your guard down. They could be waiting for us.
He was right. They were about to walk into an ambush. A sudden burst of gunfire shattered the silence. The air crackled with the smell of gunpowder.
Contact!
Ethan roared, diving for cover behind a rusty filing cabinet. Caleb, caught off guard, stumbled back, narrowly avoiding a spray of bullets.
They're in the offices!
Tyler yelled, returning fire blindly down the hallway. The PMCs were pinned down, their carefully laid plans in disarray. The scabs, it seemed, had been expecting them. Caleb scrambled to reload his shotgun, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't signed up for this. He had a wife, a family back home. He had to get out of here, alive. While the firefight raged, Ethan saw an opportunity. He noticed a set of double doors at the end of the hallway, partially ajar. The chaos around him seemed to slow down as he focused on his target. The doors were slightly open, almost inviting him in, and he knew this was his chance to make a move.
Cover me!
He shouted, sprinting towards the doors. He could hear Tyler and Caleb laying down suppressing fire, keeping the scabs' heads down. The sound of gunfire echoed through the hallway, but Ethan kept his focus. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran, each step bringing him closer to the doors and the potential treasure behind them. He burst through the doors, finding himself in a luxurious office. A massive oak desk sat in the middle of the room, facing a wall-sized window that offered a panoramic view of the factory complex. The room was a stark contrast to the chaos outside, with its polished wooden floors and elegant decor. It was clear that this was the office of someone important, someone who had a lot to protect. But Ethan had no time to admire the view. He was here for one thing: loot. His eyes scanned the room quickly, looking for anything that might be of value. He knew that time was of the essence, and he couldn't afford to waste a single second. He spotted a safe hidden behind a painting of Lenin. This had to be it. The painting was slightly askew, revealing the edge of the safe behind it. Ethan's pulse quickened as he approached, knowing that this was what they had been searching for. He quickly input the code that their intel had provided. With a satisfying click, the safe swung open, revealing stacks of cash, gold bars, and a handful of shiny, valuable computer chips. The sight of the treasure made Ethan's eyes widen in disbelief. This was more than he had expected, and he knew that it would make a huge difference for their mission.
Jackpot.
Ethan stands before an open safe, its contents of gold bars, cash, and computer chips gleaming under a single light. The room seemed to glow with the reflection of the treasure, and for a moment, everything else faded away. He knew that this was a turning point, a moment that would be remembered. With a deep breath, he began to gather the loot, knowing that they still had to make it out alive. Back in the hallway, Tyler and Caleb were running low on ammo. They had to move, to regroup.
Ethan, we gotta go.
Tyler yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. There was no response.
Ethan!
Still nothing.
We can't wait for him. We have to go now.
Caleb shouted, fear edging into his voice. Tyler hesitated, torn between loyalty to his friend and self-preservation. Finally, he nodded grimly. They retreated down the stairwell, the sounds of gunfire echoing behind them. They moved quickly, their boots pounding on the metal steps. Adrenaline surged through their veins, a potent cocktail of fear and desperation. They didn't know if Ethan was alive or dead, they only knew they had to escape. They reached the bottom of the stairs and burst through a door, back into the relative safety of the factory floor. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified in the cavernous space. The factory, once a bustling hub of activity, now stood silent and eerie, its machinery long abandoned. They sprinted across the open space, heading for their extraction point. Their footsteps echoed loudly, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in every shadow. The extraction point was their only hope, a beacon of safety in the midst of chaos. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, silhouetted against the flickering light of a burning barrel. The light cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the figure appear larger and more menacing. The sudden appearance sent a jolt of fear through the group.
It's me, Ethan! He shouted, his voice filled with urgency and desperation. The recognition was immediate, but so was the confusion.
The figure shouted, his voice muffled by the gas mask he wore. The mask obscured his features, making it hard to tell if it was really Ethan or someone else. The uncertainty added to the tension, making every second feel like an eternity. He was carrying a duffel bag, overflowing with loot. The bag was heavy, its contents clinking with every movement. It was clear that Ethan had been busy, scavenging whatever he could find. The sight of the loot was both a relief and a cause for concern. Relief washed over Tyler, followed instantly by a surge of adrenaline-fueled paranoia. The relief was short-lived, replaced by a gnawing fear that something was not right. His mind raced, trying to process the situation and the potential threat it posed. He raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. The weight of the weapon was familiar, a source of comfort in the uncertainty. His eyes locked onto Ethan, every muscle in his body tensed and ready to react. Before Caleb could react, before Ethan could even register what was happening, Tyler fired. The decision was made in an instant, driven by instinct and fear. The sound of the shot was deafening, a stark contrast to the silence that followed. A single shot rang out, echoing through the vast emptiness of the factory. The sound reverberated off the walls, creating an eerie symphony of echoes. The moment seemed to stretch on forever, the consequences of the shot hanging in the air. Ethan crumpled to the ground, the duffel bag spilling its contents across the dusty floor. The sight was surreal, a stark reminder of the harsh reality they were living in. The spilled loot scattered across the floor, a silent testament to the chaos and confusion of the moment.
What have you done?
Caleb screamed, his voice hoarse with disbelief. He rushed to Ethan's side, checking for a pulse, but he already knew it was futile. Ethan was gone. Tyler stood frozen, the smoking rifle still clutched in his hand. He had hesitated for a fraction of a second, his mind clouded by fear and confusion. That hesitation had cost Ethan his life. He had killed his friend. The weight of what he had done crashed down on him. He stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. He wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything but face the cold, hard reality of his actions. But there was no time for grief, no time for remorse. They were still trapped in a war zone.
We have to go, there's no time to waste.
Caleb said, his voice hollow and filled with a sense of urgency. He picked up Ethan's duffel bag, his own loot forgotten in the chaos. The weight of the bag seemed to mirror the heaviness in his heart. He slung the bag over his shoulder, the weight of it a constant reminder of their loss. Each step he took felt like a struggle, not just physically but emotionally, as memories of Ethan flooded his mind. Tyler, still in shock, could only nod dumbly. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, unable to process the reality of their situation. The factory, once a place of opportunity, had turned into a nightmare. They moved like automatons, their bodies driven by instinct and adrenaline. Each corridor they passed through seemed to stretch endlessly, the shadows playing tricks on their weary minds. The factory's eerie silence was occasionally broken by distant, haunting sounds. They couldn't bring Ethan back. All they could do was honor his memory by surviving. The thought of leaving him behind was unbearable, but they knew they had to keep moving. The factory's dark corners seemed to whisper his name, a constant reminder of their loss. They reached their extraction point, a battered old truck hidden in the shadows of the factory wall. The truck, though old and worn, represented their only hope of escape. The sight of it brought a glimmer of hope amidst their despair. They climbed in, the engine roaring to life, a deafening sound in the stillness of the factory. The vibrations of the engine seemed to shake them out of their daze, reminding them of the urgency of their escape. As they sped away, leaving behind the ghosts of industry and the memory of their fallen comrade, one thought echoed in their minds: they would never forget Ethan. The factory, now a distant silhouette, held too many painful memories, and they would never escape the haunting truth of what had happened in that factory. The events of that day would forever be etched in their minds, a constant reminder of the price they had paid. Tarkov had taken its toll. The once vibrant and hopeful group was now weary and broken. The factory had changed them in ways they couldn't yet comprehend, and they were forever changed. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would carry the scars of Tarkov with them, a testament to their resilience and the memory of their fallen friend.